kilometers an hour, with mass evacuation orders in force. Nicole Valdez is from the BBC's US partner CBS.
This is a storm that is growing and moving quickly. It's why we have seen evacuation orders issued for about a dozen or so counties, especially those living in lower lying communities. They were told to get out yesterday, and the clock is now ticking for anyone still in the area. Further north, Florida's Big Bend could be looking at a whopping 20 feet of storm surge. That's enough water to submerge a two-story building.
U.S. prosecutors have charged the Democratic mayor of New York, Eric Adams, with 5 counts of criminal offenses, including bribery. He's called the allegations lies. BBC News. The Prime Minister of Senegal, Ousmane Sonko, has pledged thorough investigations into what he said was widespread corruption under the previous government. In his first news conference since a leftist alliance swept to power in March, Mr. Sonko said a review of the country's finances showed the former administration had distorted figures to present an economic picture that had nothing to do with reality. People in Mexico are marking the 10th anniversary of the abduction and alleged murder of 43 student teachers by state forces. The incident is one of the most notorious human rights cases in modern Mexico, as Will Grant reports.
An independent investigation concluded that the 43 were kidnapped by local politicians, police officers and the military, working alongside organised crime. However, last year the investigators abruptly withdrew from Mexico, citing a raft of official obstacles. For his part, the outgoing president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, who made it a campaign promise to get to the bottom of what happened that night, has called it a state crime. But he doesn't accept the involvement of the military, saying any suggestion to the contrary is an effort to discredit one of Mexico's most important institutions.
The head of the UN's nuclear watchdog, the IAEA, has said Iran is not willing to lift its ban on specialist uranium enrichment inspectors visiting its nuclear sites. Rafael Grossi said there had been hopes the Iranians would reconsider the ban, but never say it. The Zurich Film Festival has cancelled a public showing of a controversial documentary, Russians at War, showing the lives of Russian soldiers on the front lines in Ukraine, also called as an appearance by its Russian-Canadian director. The documentary sparked outrage when it was first shown at the Venice Film Festival this month. BBC News.
Thank you. You're listening to the newsroom from the BBC World Service with Oliver Conroy. With the US election fast approaching, Volodymyr Zelensky is keen to ensure that whoever wins, Ukraine will have continued American support in its battle against the Russian invaders. To that end, he has met the Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris at the White House after holding talks with her current boss, Joe Biden.
Today we have a new support package, $7.9 billion. This will be great help, and I raised with President Biden's plan of victory. Today we are preparing to discuss the details to strengthen the plan, coordinate our positions, use and approach. Our teams will work together to ensure the implementation of our future steps.
Well, for her part, the US Vice President Kamala Harris said she stood fully behind Mr. Zelensky and Ukraine.
As I have made clear on our 6 previous meetings and throughout Putin's brutal aggression and war against Ukraine, my support for the people of Ukraine is unwavering. I've been proud to stand with Ukraine. I will continue to stand with Ukraine, and I will work to ensure Ukraine prevails in this war.
And in a veiled criticism of her Republican opponent Donald Trump, she said those calling on Ukraine to surrender territory in order to end the war were essentially supporting Vladimir Putin's proposals. In the past few hours, Mr. Trump has said he will meet President Zelensky on Friday after it looked like he was snubbed the Ukrainian leader. For more on Mr. Zelensky's meeting at the White House, I spoke to our correspondent there, Jenny Kumar.
Kamala Harris, as you heard there, spoke of her continuing unwavering support. And I guess there were 2 things that President Zelensky was focused on during these meetings with the Vice President and the President, and that was continued political support and continued military support. So what we heard from Vice President Harris was that things would continue the same if she were elected. But in a swipe to her Republican rival, she said there was some in the US who wanted Ukraine to surrender, and she said it was imperative for the US and the world to fight for Ukraine's sovereignty and democracy. Now, the Harris campaign has said basically a Trump-Vance administration would sell out Ukraine and cozy up to President Putin.
Yeah, we'll look at the Republican position in a moment, but President Biden still has, 4 months left in office. What more can he do in that time to help Ukraine?
Well, he has announced today a £8 billion aid package and further weapons support. The top ask for a long time has been permission to use Western missiles on targets deep inside Russia. Now, there's been no public granting of that permission. Even if there was, we would be unlikely to hear of it before any strikes actually happen.
Now, in the past couple of days, Donald Trump has been very critical of Volodymyr Zelensky, and now Republicans are angry with the Ukrainian leader. I mean, has he permanently blotted his copybook if the Republicans win the presidential election?
So this whole meeting here at the White House has been somewhat overshadowed by this growing row with the Republicans. And yes, there's been increasingly critical comments on President Zelensky from Donald Trump. So, for example, yesterday at a campaign rally in North Carolina, he said that the Ukrainian people were dead and the country was destroyed, so raising further questions about any future support. And there's also been another almost diplomatic row where a senior Republican has accused President Zelensky of election interference, and that's because he visited a weapons factory, and they say this was in a key battleground state of Pennsylvania. It was with top Democrats and there weren't any Republicans involved. And the House Speaker, Republican Mike Johnson, has called for the resignation of the Ukrainian ambassador.
Jenny Kumar in Washington. After ignoring demands to halt the fighting in Gaza, the Israeli Prime Minister has now rejected a proposal for a 21-day ceasefire in Lebanon. Benjamin Netanyahu promised to keep fighting Hezbollah with full force until victory is achieved on the northern border. David Menzer is a spokesman for the Israeli government.
By hitting Hezbollah the way we are, in the very calibrated way, but also in a way that causes Hezbollah devoted to our destruction, by hitting them in the way that really hurts, it's actually Israel which is making the possibility for a political, diplomatic resolution much more realistic.
Hezbollah has continued to fire rockets into Israel, something it's been doing for the best part of a year, forcing thousands to leave their homes. These residents who stayed say the Israeli military shouldn't agree to the US-led plan to halt the offensive.
21 days, they will arrange again, they will bring new missiles. I don't believe them.
We must finish with this. To kill them, to stop them, to do something. But not stop the war. No.
Well, behind the scenes at the UN, where world leaders are gathered for the General Assembly, diplomats are still pushing the ceasefire idea. And despite Mr. Netanyahu's apparent rejection of it, Washington insisted it had been coordinated with Israel. Our correspondent in Jerusalem, Daniel Simoni, gave me this update on Israel's position.
Prime Minister Netanyahu arrived in New York this afternoon, where he's going to be speaking at the UN General Assembly tomorrow, and stepping off the plane, he made plain that this is the policy. He said we're going to keep striking Hezbollah until we've met our goals. And that goal, which was set last week by his government, is to return home 60,000 Israelis who've been displaced in the north of the country by Hezbollah rocket fire. And since then, we've seen all of these strikes against Hezbollah and these very, very extensive airstrikes this week. And the rhetoric from the Israeli leadership is that the only way to achieve this goal is through military means. Previously, there was more openness, at least verbally, to a diplomatic way forward, but that seems to have closed. And certainly it's a coalition government here in Israel, and when there was talk this morning and speculation in the media and elsewhere about this possible ceasefire, some of his coalition partners, including the security minister and the finance minister, both came out and said they would simply not accept it. So certainly his government's been talking down any prospect of a diplomatic solution to this.
Yeah, well, in the US, the White House says discussions are still continuing for this possible 21-day ceasefire. But in the past few hours, Israel says it has secured nearly $9 billion worth of US military aid. So it doesn't look like Washington wants to use any possible leverage it may have.
Well, I think Washington has verbally been saying for a long time that they want a diplomatic way out of this. They say they're working very hard on a solution. They've said that there could be devastating consequences if this conflict with Hezbollah escalates, for example, if there's a ground invasion by Israel. But it does obviously still have leverage over Israel. Some people are very critical and says it doesn't use all the leverage it has. I think it remains to be seen what other kind of pressure might be placed on Israel. But certainly I think the diplomatic efforts are going to go on, and I think tomorrow will be a big day with Prime Minister Netanyahu speaking to the UN, and I think he's going to kind of answer those who are calling on him to do a ceasefire.
Daniel Simoni in Jerusalem. In Lebanon, the health ministry said 40 people have been killed in Israeli airstrikes over the past 24 hours, bringing the total to almost 700 since Monday. Israel's Air Force said it struck more than 200 targets, including Hezbollah infrastructure sites and weapons storage facilities. But many ordinary Lebanese are suffering. This man spoke in front of the rubble of a destroyed house in the Bekaa Valley.
The Israeli enemy has committed massacres and genocide in Gaza and is now repeating it here in Lebanon. This house is peaceful and consists of 3 children and an elderly mother. What do these civilians have to do with this?
Thousands of people have fled their homes and taken shelter in displacement centres. Others have left Lebanon altogether, with reports of more than 30,000 crossing into Syria. Aid agencies are struggling to keep up with the needs of the displaced and the injured. Etty Higgins from UNICEF is in Beirut.
This morning there was more barrage and airstrikes on key water infrastructure in parts of Lebanon, which has put those water pumping stations completely out of action, cutting off safe drinking water for hundreds of thousands of people.
Our correspondent Rami Ruhaim is in Tyre on the southern coast of Lebanon. I asked him whether Hezbollah wants a ceasefire.
I think they are keen for a ceasefire, but crucially for a ceasefire that includes Gaza. That has been the position of Hezbollah since they started attacking Israeli positions, first in the occupied Shib'a farms and then across the border. They said this is a support front for Gaza, and they said that it will not stop until the Israelis stop their onslaught in Gaza. So in Hezbollah's view, a ceasefire is one that includes Gaza and one that does not break that link, that they insist on the link between the Lebanese front and the Gaza front. Of course, the Israelis are adamant that they want to break exactly that link, so it's not exactly clear how the two positions can be in any way brought closer together.
But while the fighting goes on, it seems Hezbollah is taking much worse punishment than Israel. Israel says a Hezbollah drone commander was killed today. How damaging are these attacks on its military infrastructure?
Well, we can't really know. They're certainly damaging, no doubt, and the pager attacks were also very, very damaging. The assassination in Dahye on Friday was probably more damaging than the one today. We still don't know whether the assassination today succeeded, by the way. They still have not confirmed it. But yes, absolutely, they have taken very, very big and very, very painful blows. But they have also expanded the geographic scope of their attacks, and they've also increased the firepower. They have also brought in new weapons, new kinds of missiles into play. So they certainly were not paralyzed by all of these very painful blows. And it appears that the way things look, there's only one way it can go, and that's more escalation. There doesn't seem to be any way out of this at the moment.
In Tyre, in southern Lebanon, you're listening to the news from the BBC World Service. The mayor of New York is arguably the most powerful city official in the world, but the man who currently has the job, Eric Adams, Mayor Adams has denied all the charges and told a news conference he'd been demonised.
This is not surprising to us at all. The police, commentary, being demonized. And I ask New Yorkers to wait to hear our defense before making any judgments. I will continue to do the job for 8.3 million New Yorkers that I was elected to do.
Our correspondent Neda Tawfiq in New York told me more about the charges that were unsealed on Thursday.
This is a wide-ranging indictment, 57 pages long, that really alleges nearly a decade-long scheme of bribery and corruption. And they say that Eric Adams, we heard there, was accepting what they say he knew was illegal foreign campaign contributions from foreign nationals and really sought to enrich himself through it. So in the indictment, for example... anti-crime agenda, very much moderate when he came in. But it's interesting to see that we haven't seen Republicans really go too much on the attack.
Neda Tawfiq in New York. It has been 10 years since the shocking story of the mass disappearance of 43 students in Mexico. They attended a college in Iguala in the southern state of Guerrero. The trainee teachers were abducted and killed, apparently by local police officers in collusion with organised crime gangs. The investigation was marred by allegations of corruption and a cover-up. The names of only 3 of the missing students have ever been identified. Today, protesters are marching in Mexico City to demand justice. Let's hear from 2 of the survivors, who still hope to recover.
I was carrying a Nokia phone. It was the one I used to record the videos where you can see the police were shooting at us. I'm recording them. Shoot me, I'm recording you. And it's my comrades and I who appear in the videos yelling at the police.
They have tried to discourage us by saying that it has already been 10 years. What do we think happened? That it's most likely that they're dead. We insist our colleagues are listed as missing, and therefore there is a chance that they are alive.
Our correspondent in Mexico City, Daniel Pardo, told me that a decade on, there is still real anger over the crime.
Involvement in this case.
I mean, is it still a complete mystery, or a decade on, do people have theories about what happened?
There are some theories, yes. Most of the information we have has come from the press rather than from the government. The students were going that day to Mexico City in order to participate in a commemoration event of the Tlatelolco massacre. In 1968, 400 students were killed by the government who were protesting because of social rights. And 1968 was a very convoluted year all over the world. On their way there, they were stopped in Iguala by a criminal gang called Guerreros Unidos, who is mainly involved in trafficking heroin, and they were alleged to be killed and then burned. The question is why they did it. Is it because there was a pack of heroin inside the bus? Were they traveling? they confused them with the rival gang. We don't know yet, and the idea generally in this country is that the case is still impugned.
And has anyone been held to account either for the crime itself or for the failure to investigate properly?
Most people think that in general the government has not been accountable, but yes, 132 people have been arrested, most of them policemen and others members of the Guerreros Unidos gang. And you could say that the previous government of Enrique Peña Nieto was partly held accountable by the people, by the voters. He was very unpopular, partly because of his handling of this case.
Daniel Pardo in Mexico City. Astronomers have just published a new map of the Milky Way, a galaxy that includes our own solar system. It is, of course, a very big thing to map, 950,000 trillion kilometres wide. It takes light about 100,000 years to get across. Professor Catherine Hamans is the Astronomer Royal for Scotland. She's been telling us what this new map brings to our understanding of the Milky Way.
So any listeners out there who are lucky enough to live in a dark sky location will have seen that faint band of stars that arches all the way across the night sky that marks out the plane of our Milky Way galaxy. And it's that arch, starry arch, that has been observed for 13 years now using a telescope that was built right here in the UK, the Vista telescope that's based out now in Chile in the Atacama Desert. And what they've done is they've mapped out all of the objects in that arch of the Milky Way, but in the southern hemisphere, so looking into the centre of our Milky Way galaxy. And what's really fantastic about this telescope, what's really niche about it, is it looks in the infrared. I like to think of this telescope as it's kind of like our commando telescope. When you watch the movies, you see the commandos go out at night and they can't see anything, so they put on their night vision goggles. That's exactly what we're doing with Vista, because when you look into our Milky Way galaxy, it's full of dust, which obscures the light that we can see with our own eyes. So we have to look in the infrared light to peer through the dust to see baby stars forming. And the montage of images that have been released today that you can go and look at show some of the prettiest points in our Milky Way galaxy, where you see these nurseries, stellar nurseries, where these brand new stars are forming, gorgeous, colourful, gassy regions of our galaxy where new stars are being formed and new planets are being created.
Scotland's Astronomer Royal Catherine Hamans. Nearly a fifth of children in China are overweight. Many more have poor eyesight. To tackle both issues and to improve mental health, communist authorities have said school children should spend at least 2 hours a day doing physical activity, some of it outdoors. I heard more about the plan and the reaction to it from China media analyst Kerry Ann.
There are two main aims behind this. One of them is to target obesity and the other is to target eye problems. So we're talking nearsightedness. So real problems with young Chinese students sitting for long periods of time, eating junk food and developing eye problems. The idea is that this new rule will ensure that students can get outside, get some sunshine, talk with one another more, and it's also good for their mental well-being.
Do they not get enough outside activity at the moment?
They don't, not really. So normally there are breaks in between classes that are very, very short. When I lived in China, I worked in a school for a period of time, and a lot of students find that it's very, very difficult to find somewhere to have a little space to play before having to rush back in.
Yeah, so it sounds like they'll have to make some considerable changes there.
Yes, and that's one of the concerns on Chinese social media platforms today. So a lot of people on the platform Weibo, which is China's equivalent of a platform like Facebook or X, they're saying that unless there are regulations that ensure schools have to do this, they think that it won't happen. But there are some who think these have been big problems, especially since the COVID-19 pandemic, when students were remote studying for a long period of time. They were in their homes, not moving, in front of computer screens for 8 hours a day. They can see the benefits of this, and they're hoping that it could provide benefits to young Chinese children.
Yeah, I mean, the benefits of physical activity are well known. Why didn't they think about something like this before?
Well, there's a lot to get into